Hello, Garland Nixon here, and it's a wonderful holiday. I'm sitting here. You'll notice I'm eating my non-binary gingerbread persons of color, and we're gonna have a nice Christmas chat. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here. Don't forget, if you don't know what these are, I'm nibbling on a few of them even as we are now, as we talk. They used to be called gingerbread men, but now they're non-binary gingerbread persons of color. So don't forget about that. It's important that we are correctly identify our gingerbread persons. Anyway, let's talk. Oh, an awesome guy says Merry Christmas, all. Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah, and whatever your religion is, whatever you celebrate, whatever you don't celebrate, have a wonderful day and enjoy some gingerbread, non-binary gingerbread persons of color. Make sure you enjoy those because I guess in our society today, back in my day, we cooked gingerbread men and we ate them, but now they're non-binary gingerbread persons of color because they are brown. So I guess they got to be of color. And I guess if they're homemade, wouldn't they be indigenous? Right? Like, I guess we could continue on forever. Then you bite one of their arms off. I guess they're what? Reachably challenged, indigenous, non binary, gingerbread persons of color. And then what happens if you put white frosting? I don't know. Look, forget it. The gingerbread persons of color are delicious, and I've been nibbling on them. So let's continue. All right. Um, the issue I'm talking about today, and again, if you're like, well, why is it's Christmas for God's sake? You should do what you like. And this is a perfect day to do what I like. I like to run my mouth. I'm going to talk about something that I was thinking about, and that is okay, so you hear me say often the US is an empire, right? And I think of an empire like an octopus, right? You've got the main body, which is the US, right? The Washington, D.C., one could argue that's the main body, right? And what does an octopus have? And the mouth is there. And an octopus has all these tentacles that reach out and grab things and drag them back to the middle, to the mouth, and consumes them. And that is what makes the octopus's body strong. Those arms reach out, right? And one could say the US is an empire, and let's say Washington, D.C. is the body, right? And the arms are going to Africa. I always make this point. Why is it that I live in Maryland? Forgive me if you've heard it before. Why is it that I live in Maryland? And in Westminster, Maryland, everything on the East Coast is named after something in England. Westminster, Maryland, there are a lot of apple orchards out that way. And I could buy apples an hour away, and they're $1.99 a pound. 2.39 a pound, whatever. God knows the price of things I wouldn't even want to think. But I can buy bananas that are 4,000 miles away for 49 cents a pound, for 25% of what I'm paying for the stuff right here. Why is that? It's because we are an empire. And what we have done is taken some countries, such as in Central or South America, and said to that country, we're going to overthrow your government. Think about the United Fruit Company. You might have heard of that. It became what? Dole, Chiquita, one of those eventually. But these gigantic fruit companies that went to South America, went to Latin America, went to Central America, overthrew their governments and put in vassals so that they could utilize the entire country as a banana plantation. These countries, it's best, just like investments, right? Now, more than ever, it's best if your country is diversified, right? Think about life. The more diverse life is in a planet, in a forest, or whatever, it's more likely that life survives. So a country that has a diverse economy is more likely to be economically strong. And these countries were trying to do it. The U.S. would overthrow them. They would not allow the country to normally develop. And the country would effectively be a banana plantation for the United States. That's all it was. Quick story. My dad, as you might have heard before, was a longshoreman. What did he do? He unloaded ships. They had a ship that came in every week called the Fort Laser. And the Fort Laser came in weekly loaded with bananas. It went down to every week or every 10 days, maybe. It went down to Costa Rica, wherever the hell. It loaded with a shipload of bananas and brought them back up here, right? So, needless to say, I ate a lot of bananas when I was a kid. But one of the things that happened was the bananas used to come in on stalks, but they changed that and they decided we're going to have the peasants that pick them box them and then bring them up here and they'll already be boxed. Why is that? Because while they were on stalks, they were poisonous snakes, poisonous spiders, things like that that would get on these things. And they'd get up here, the longshoremen would go unloading these stalks, and every now and then one of them would get bit by a spider, snake, whatever. And uh it cost a lot of money. Longshoremen made good money. They had good benefits. They had good retirement. If one of them died, whatever the case, it was very, very expensive if a longshoreman got crapped out. So they said, we'll let the peasants do it. The peasants die, we just get another peasant, right? So in that instance, the United States overthrew these governments and turned them into basically, let's say, a banana plantation if they needed bananas, Venezuela, an oil plantation if they needed oil. These countries were nothing but systems that were built to feed the U.S. empire in one way or the other, whether it was natural resources, whether it was literally to feed the U.S. empire, country after country. So countries were not allowed, Guatemala, Venezuela, etc. They were not allowed to develop. In fact, they were not even allowed to be sovereign. The United States would overthrow the government, put in a puppet, murder and slaughter anybody on especially in South America, the lefties that were fighting back, be it the Sandinistas or whoever, had to be slaughtered. They'd put in some kind of a fascist dictator and basically use the entire country, right, to enrich the empire. Various countries, you produce coffee, you produce oil, you produce bananas. Each of those countries were used to enrich the U.S. empire. Now, the people in the U.S. empire didn't gripe. Why? Why didn't they gripe? Because they were living well. They either did one of two things. And I'm saying the U.S. empire, the colonial powers in uh, um, Europe, etc., were kind of doing the same things, but that's a discussion we're going to get into. So basically, the people in the US did one of two things. Either they just turned their head and pretended they didn't see it, or they just said, I'll accept all the good things. And hey, you know what? We're screwing over a lot of countries and we're killing a lot of innocent peasants. But hey, that's okay as long as I make out, they convinced themselves that it was in the best interest of the world for country X, Guatemala, Venezuela, you name it, Colombia, to be overthrown, to be destabilized, and loaded, to utilize it as a factory for whatever various resources that the U.S. empire needed to maintain a very high level of living. Okay, so that's what's going on now. One of the things the U.S. called the pink tide in South America, things of that nature. What was that? It was pushback. It was countries simply saying, we want independence and we want sovereignty. And then there would be some manners of wars and fights. A lot of that happened through the 80s. Think about this. Through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you had a lot of pushback on colonial powers in Africa, in the Middle East, etc. Countries 40s saying, we're tired of being a colony of England or France or whatever, right? Well, that never stopped. It's still going on. Look what's going on in Africa right now. Mali, various other countries that have been nothing but colonies of France. They're like, we're sick of it being a colony. We want out. You've got countries in island countries in the Caribbean now saying, you know what, we don't want to be under the crown anymore. We've had enough. So this has been going on. You may say for 100 years or so of countries trying to fight. Well, it's been going on for a long time, but more success. Countries getting out from under colonialism. And why? Simply because if you have a country and the colonial power, the United States, sees oil or some natural resources of value, it's going to come to your country. It's going to say to your government, give us all your stuff. If your government says no, then they find out what they're really saying is give us all your stuff or we'll kill you. So the United States is what? It's a pirate. I put it like this. People think they're on a luxury liner. They're really on a pirate ship. Give us what we want or we'll kill you. when the country's leaders say, well, we'd like to look out for the best interest of our people, the U.S. empire says, well, in that case, we're going to overthrow your government, and we're going to put some fascist dictator in, some corrupt criminals that'll give us everything we want. And there we go. We need coffee. Your country has coffee. You're going to give us coffee. And if your leaders don't, we'll kill you, and we'll put some in. And again, the United States people thought, hey, this is fine. We're living pretty good. But what was going on here was a criminal enterprise, mafia. Right? If you look at it, the U.S. intelligence operation community for years have done a lot of work with the mafia. Right? What happened when Kennedy got killed? The guy that took out the so-called killer was Jack Rubenstein, Jack Ruby, mafia. What happened? There was a trial, Jowers versus the King family versus Jowers. Martin Luther King's family sued, had a lawsuit. Alleging that, look it up, Jowers, Jowers, alleging that there was a vast conspiracy and the government was involved with the murder of Martin Luther King, and they tied it to what? The mafia. As soon as you see the mafia involved in a murder, in a murder of that nature, of a person who's very well known, and you know that the system doesn't like, you know that intelligence community is involved, right? So they found that the mafia was involved in the conspiracy to kill King. A jury, look it up, a jury legitimately found that Martin Luther King was killed as a result of a vast conspiracy that included state and local and federal governments, right? So why is it that the mafia works so well with the U.S. intelligence agencies? Because the U.S. government, Americans don't want to admit this. Americans want to, I love America. We're great. We're wonderful. We're the free and the brave and all this kind of crap. The truth is, if you look at the nature, forget America as a country. If you just look at the nature of empire, if you look at the definition of empire, I heard someone one time saying, oh, no, we're not an empire. The left wants to say we're an empire. Look at the definition of empire. It could not be more blatantly obvious that the U.S. is an empire, right? What do you think? 850, 900, whatever bases around the world, and we ain't an empire? Vassals and colonies everywhere. South Korea, literally, it's in their constitution that in times of war, the U.S. takes control of the South Korean government, military. You're telling me that is a free country? What about Japan? The U.S. is completely in control of Japan. Japan is about to dramatically increase the spending for military, but where's that spending go? Two places. Two places. Number one, they pay for the occupation of U.S. troops. So number one, a big part of their money is going to go in keeping U.S. troops there, it's paying for the old the slave paying for the master's inconvenience. Number one. Number two, they're buying all kinds of, they're going to build up their military capabilities. Where are they going to buy the gear? Where are they going to buy the gear? Here's a country that 200% of their GDP, they're in debt 200% of their GDP, one of the most indebted countries in the world, and they're going to do massive spending. And where's that money going to go? Lockheed Martin, it's going to go back to the U.S. So my point is, it's hard to say this United States, that the United States, A, is not a empire. B, as I said, with Latin American countries, for starters, I could go on and on and on with African countries, but with Latin American countries, just as a start, it's hard to admit that the U.S., to deny that the U.S. has not been a brutal colonialist power, very brutal, overthrowing governments, murdering and slaughtering and kidnapping leaders of the government. We could go on and on. You could go to Africa and you could go to Kwame Nkrumah and Thomas Sankara. You could go to name after name after name of people who were in charge of governments that the U.S. overthrow and or killed. Muammar Gaddafi, etc. And what the U.S. does is it lies to the American people, propagandizes them. So, of course, they get the hero villain and they say, oh, we had to take him out because he's an evil villain, which implies that we're the hero, right? Whenever the U.S. says Putin, Assad, you name it, Sankara, whoever is an evil, terrible villain, doesn't it also imply, it has to imply that we're the good guys. You don't even have to say you're the good guys. Who's Garland Nixon fighting? For instance, you're sitting there watching a Marvel movie and you see some guy and you're like, he's whatever, right? Dr. Octopus, right? Oh, he's an evil villain. And you see somebody fighting him. You don't have to ask if that guy's the hero. It implied by the fact that he's fighting the villain. Only the hero fights the villain. So I can tell you that guy's a villain. I can identify the villain, and my aggression against him in and of itself will cement the concept in your mind that I'm a hero. You only got two options, a hero and a villain. I used to do sales. Love to do analogies. It's the way I got to understand the way the brain works. I used to do sales. I was a very good salesperson because I studied, read a lot of books on the brain, on psychology, how the brain works. And my favorite close, I did a lot of stuff, was closing is how you get the sale, right? I'm selling you this, and the close is to get you to put pen to paper, right? So what I did was this. They called it the Ben Franklin close. I don't even know why. But what you do is this. When it was all said and done, I did a lot of cameras and camera networking and a lot of security for buildings, security for installations, things of that nature, because I have an extensive background on that stuff. So I do that. I'd set it all up. And what did I do in the end? When it was all over, I'd write on a piece of paper, A, and I'd put blah, 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 blah. These things, let's say $10,000 and $150 a month maintenance. That would be your cost. And over here, I'd put $25,000 and $350 a month maintenance, right? I had two options for you. And I'd write A and B, and I'd write down, and then I'd say, okay, customer, let's do this. Here's your options. We've identified your issues, blah, 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 blah. What you need, your security, who needs to see it. Okay, let's go down the list. These are all things you get. $10,000, $150 a month. That's the least expensive option. Over here, we've got an option. The price is a little bit higher, but you're going to get gate service, blah, blah, blah. Give them the old rigmarole. I didn't lie. I told the truth. And this one is $25,000 and $350 a month, right? Which one of these works best for you? And I'd take the paper and I'd slide it over to the other person and I would shut up. And there's a saying in sales, whoever talks first loses, right? And at the point, and sometimes people would look at you. They look at the paper. They may look at their partner, their wife, whoever. They look at the paper. They look at you. I'd look at them. They'd look. Now, if they had a partner or a wife and they looked and they kept looking at each other, I knew at that point they wanted to talk about it. So I'd say, oh, you know what? I got to run out to the car to call my manager and check on something for another deal I'm working on. If you would, could you give me about 10 minutes? And they'd say, sure. And I'd go out there for about 20 minutes. And then I'd come back in because I gave them time to talk. And then when I came back in, I shut up again because whoever talks first loses. But here's the bottom line to all of that. Why do I say all of that? The way the brain works, you give somebody two options, and in the end, they'll select one of them. That's the way it works. They'd come back and eventually say, I think we're going to go with B or A. Most of the time, it rarely failed, right? So here's my point. When the U.S. plays that game and they build up Assad, Putin, Gaddafi, whoever, right? Once they build them up as the villain, they don't have to build themselves up as a hero. They don't have to say that the operation they're doing to overthrow the country, to bomb them, to do this. They don't have to say it's good. The way the brain works is, you got two options, a villain and a hero. And once they demonize this person and all that they're doing to their people and this and the region and the threats and we don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud, all this kind of stuff. Once they get finished doing that, they just stand back here and you're looking at them like, yeah, they are sure a villain, which means we're going to take them out. Yes, America, go. We're number one, right? That's the way the game works. But when you look at it, history of the U.S. empire is obvious. We go to your country. Or during the Cold War, what was that about? The U.S. saw the entire world, right? The devil's chessboard. They saw the entire world as a chessboard, and they were shooting for world hegemony. They wanted to control the entire world. The ultimate greed. That's the neocons, the ultimate greed for power. So it was like, well, here's a country, Russia might control it, or we might control it. We got to take it. We didn't care what was going on with the people in the country. We would slaughter them, murder them, bomb them, things of that nature, anything, overthrow their governments. They were irrelevant. They were part of a chessboard, and we had to control the chessboard. So we would had to fight everywhere in the world, everywhere. That was right. And we hated the Russians. Why? Because they were communist. It was all ideological. But here's what's interesting about that. Russia's not communist anymore. And the U.S. leadership and the neocons and the globalists still hate them, which means it was never ideological. It was never because they were communists. That was a front. That was a cover story for the U.S. people. It was because Russia was a challenge to world hegemony. That's why they hated him. That's why they tried to take him out, because they saw them as a challenge to them ruling the world. And the fact that to call them communists is good as anything else. Now, there are issues that the US has with socialism. That's a whole nother thing, neoliberalism versus socialism. One could argue, if you look at the world, that neoliberalism tends to be the most prevalent ideology of the rich. Socialism tends to be the most prevalent, when you go around the world, most prevalent, very prevalent ideology of the poor. Not a whole lot of rich people are socialists. So that's a whole nother discussion. But the US ideology was not, excuse me, the ideology that they told us, the cover story of ideology that they opposed socialism or communism, was the smallest part of it. The biggest part of it was, let me give you an example. Is Portugal run by the Socialist Party? Isn't that the ruling? I believe the Communist Socialist Party, that's the ruling party in Portugal. How about Vietnam? The U.S. wants to build a base in Vietnam. They want to ally with Vietnam, but Vietnam's ruling party is the Communist Party. One would think that the U.S. couldn't possibly do that. Think of the hypocrisy of the GOP. The communists, the CCP, they're evil. The Communist Party of China is evil. What about Vietnam? We'd love to build a base and ally with the Communist China Party, the Communist Party of Vietnam. That way we can take out China. Well, it isn't communism that you hate, is it? You don't see Vietnam as a threat to world hegemony. You see China as a threat to world hegemony. You're willing to enlist the aid of every communist country that's small, that doesn't oppose world hegemony, your world hegemony, as long as they know their place. And eventually, it's like, help me eat China. What are you going to do? I'll eat you later. But after you're done helping me eat China, which is not going to happen anyway. Okay. Why do I say all that? And where am I going with all that? Because that's a lot. What I'm saying, I think, is that the cost of being a U.S. ally is getting astronomically high. That's really what I'm getting at here, right? Because if you're going to be my friend, right? Here's the term. I'm sure you've heard it before: cost benefit analysis, right? Hey, Garland, I want you to be my friend. What am I going to get it? It's simple. Young guy goes into a bar and there's a pretty girl. And he says, hi, how are you? And they start talking. One of the things these people, they're doing when they're thinking whether or not they want to have a relationship or go date again is a cost benefit analysis. What is in it for me? What am I going to get out of this relationship? And what do I have to put in it? Right? You look at her and well, I think she's pretty and she's nice looking, or maybe she's not all that pretty, but I like her and I think she's a cool person. I'll have fun with her. So I'm going to get some emotional. Oh, maybe it's sexual. Oh, she's hot. I want physical, right? And she's looking at the same guy. Maybe he's thinking of economic. All these are factors. But what is it? It's a cost benefit analysis. We do that constantly. What do I put out? What do I get back? Right? Okay. If you're going to ally with a country, there's a cost benefit analysis. Now, in the event of the U.S. empire, for the small countries that had resources, it was simple. Give us what you want. The benefit is we won't kill you. The cost is if you don't, we will kill you. So the cost benefit analysis became very, very different for Guatemala and Venezuela and Argentina and all of these Latin American countries, and Burkina Faso with Thomas Sankara, and Ghana with Kwame Nkrumah. It became, the cost benefit analysis was totally different. It was, we're going to take your resources and we're powerful, so there's nothing you can do about it. You're going to suffer, you're going to be impoverished, and we're taking everything you got. The only question is, will we have to commit genocide in your country? Will we have to bomb your people? We have to murder your leaders? Your people are going to starve and suffer. That's done. There's no way around that. We're far too powerful for you to stop that. The only question is, how do we get there? Do we get there through killing all the leaders, overthrowing you guys, and putting in our puppets, or not? It becomes a question for the leaders. Do they go? Now, there are a lot of leaders of some of these countries who tried to fight back, and a lot of them were killed, slaughtered, things of that nature, overthrown. But that was the cost benefit of analysis cost benefit analysis for these potential victims of the U.S. empire, right? I say this: the U.S. empire sees two kinds of countries. And as an empire, period. Empires see two types of countries: countries that they've conquered, countries that they intend to conquer. And how do you know that the U.S. empire has conquered a country? They put bases in there. If you want to know whether or not your country is one of the ones that has been conquered by the U.S. empire, ask yourself, do we have bases there? Now, there are some instances wherein they feel so comfortable they don't need to, or there's other reasons they may not. But over and all, let me ask you this: does Germany have bases? Does Italy have? Does France have? Does uh, Korea, Japan, the United States after World War II put bases in these countries, right? Why they leave them there? World War II is over. The threat's gone. Everything. Why does the U.S. leave bases in Germany, in England, in Korea, in wherever, right? In Japan. The U.S. had to manufacture a threat. There was no reasonable threat. The U.S. had to come up and say, somebody's going to attack you, so we got to have our bases. And they couldn't just say, we're keeping bases in there because we've conquered your country and you're being occupied. A lot of people know it. The poor slubs that live in the country that somehow think they're allies of the United States don't know it. But a lot of people in these countries know that they're occupied, and a lot of them are figuring it out. How are they figuring it out, and why are they figuring it out? Cost benefit analysis. You are now in England, France, Germany, and you say, okay, I'm an ally of the United States. What does that mean? That means that the United States is going to push me and say, you need to spend 2% of your budget on military hardware, and you need to buy it from us, and we mean it. The U.S. is going to say, stop doing business with the Russians. And if you say, well, nah, I don't want to because it benefits me, because if I do, then I'll lose all my industry. The U.S. says, oh, you don't want to listen, do you? Oh, you got hard hit? You can't hear? Watch this. They blow your damn infrastructure up and say, now shut up and do what you're told. For Germans, the cost is everything. And for Europe now, I'll put it like this. Think about what I said a few minutes ago. The U.S. empire went into Guatemala, wherever the hell, and said, we're going to turn your country into a banana plantation. If you don't like it, we'll kill all your leaders. We'll kill, you'll suffer, you'll fall into poverty, we'll genocide, we'll do whatever the hell we want. Your ass is grass, right? And if the leaders of that country said no, then that's the way it was. They destroyed everything, and they overthrew the government. Any people who pushed back, they trained death squads to go out and slaughter them, nuns, priests, you name it, just slaughtered anybody who were, genocide type things, right? Literal genocides. So now it's your turn in England. It's your turn in France. You're not England. England's a different animal. England considers itself part of the U.S. empire. It considers itself an extension of the U.S. empire, unlike France and Germany and some of these other countries, right? So England feels like, we're part of the U.S. empire. To England, it's like this. Our pride and power comes from being the right hand of the U.S. empire. And so should our people starve and our economies being destroyed? Fair enough. That's fine. We don't care as far as the ruling elite in England, because they're like, our pride. We identify our power and our pride as being the right hand of the U.S. empire, as being the very closest to the king. There's a term courtier, whatever, right? Somebody who hangs around the king's court to suck off power from the king, right? I'm going to hang around the king's court. I'm going to become friendly with the king. I'm going to become like the king's buddy. And everybody will know, don't mess with Garland. Why? He's tight with the king. You better not. If you say anything to Garland, he walks over and whispers in the king's ear, your head's gone, right? That's what the UK sees themselves. They're close to the king. And for that privilege, the ruling elite of the and I put it like this: the ruling elite of the Brits do not see another option. They see themselves. They see the alternative to that, to them, is death. So now what are they doing? They are sacrificing the lifestyle, the economy, the safety, everything of the people in England, the working class, the working poor, and the poor in England. Everything's being sacrificed, just so they can maintain their, quote, special relationship. When they say special relationship, what they mean is, we're at the right hand of the king, and we can whisper in the king's ear, and we can get the king to do things. And what's the price? Well, the price is the economic and physical well-being of our population. Fair enough. They don't care. The only question is, and I say this a lot, the only question is this: are the British people going to put up with it? If they put up with it, then they got it coming. If the British people say, "Look, we're gonna keep waving our blue and yellow flags and say go go go, and we'll make our sacrifices," and who needs food and jobs and all that kind of things, then they're going to get the outcome that they got coming. If the British people wake up and say, "Wait a minute, we're being had, we're being took, and we ain't standing, we're taken to the streets, we're going to do a national strike, blah blah blah, we're going to shut this country down," and if you think you're going to do anything, continue to throw our lifestyle to the alligators, well, then you're not going to have a country, because we're not going to do anything to make it work. It will stop working. If the British people do that, they'll get what they want. If they don't do that, they're going to get what they got coming. I hope they do the former rather than the latter, but we shall see. So it's important when you talk about the allies slash vassals slash victims of the United States that you put the U.S., Australia into a separate kind of category. And a perfect example is AUKUS. What did the U.S. do when it first woke up and it realized, holy crap, China's getting big? And what did they say? We got to reconstitute the British Empire. AUKUS, Australia, the UK, and the US. Why? Why separate? Because that is the Anglo-Saxon, English-speaking empire that they want to control everything. Not France. You don't speak English. Not the Germans. None of you people. Nope. Sorry, you're not an English speaking. They're going to reconstitute the Anglo-Saxon empire so they can stand up to um, uh, uh, the Chinese, the yellow people in Chinese, and put them back in their place, right? And then shut up France and Germany and the rest of you countries. You will shut up and do what you're told, and you'll be dragged along, and you'll be like a good little vassal. I don't know how that's going to work out, but let's keep going. So, what's going on here? Like I said, set England aside, because the ruling class of the Brits don't give a crap. They want their special relationship. They're willing to throw the British people into the wood chipper to maintain their seat at the right hand of the king. So that's what the emperor, excuse me, which is the U.S. empire. So we'll see what happens with England. The pain's going up. England is not crashing. England's not crashing. England has crashed. England has been disemboweled by the U.S. empire. It's talk to people who live in England. The hunger is through the roof. Crime is through the roof. Stress and poverty and things of that nature. And the pain has not even begun in Europe, in England. It ain't even started there. So what's going to happen when they're significant economic pain hits them? We'll see. Will they wake up? I don't know. Maybe not. Now let's go to the other vassals. Japan, 200% of their economy. They've got a debt that's 200% of their economy. Their economy's crashing quickly. Let's go to Germany. Germany's done. Olaf Scholz is saying things like, look, when this thing is over, we're going to have to start talking with the Russians. Yeah, well, what makes you think the Russians are going to want to listen? You see, I don't think that dog's going to hunt anymore, Olaf. You've gone along with the U.S. You've attacked. Look, you had a decision to make. Not really a decision. You would have a decision to make if you, had an independent sovereign country. So you didn't really have a decision. It was exposed by the Ukrainian conflict. It was exposed that Germany is not a sovereign nation. It was exposed that Europe is not sovereign. The beautiful thing about the Ukrainian conflict, right? There's nothing beautiful about war, but I'm saying from a philosophical discussion, from a geopolitical discussion perspective, is that it made a lot of things clear. And one of the things that it made clear was that the U.S. allies are not allies. They're vassals. That NATO is not a collection of countries. NATO is a collection of victims. The countries in NATO are not allied with the United States. They are imprisoned by the United States. So when the United States will violently enforce the rules of that prison. If you try to get out of that prison, what happens if a prisoner tries to escape? They got guards, they got watchtowers around, and they'll open up, as Jimi Hendrix said, all along the watchtower, right? Watchtowers all around. You try to get out of prison, you're going to get a machine gun strike, right? Well, Germany tried to get out of prison. Germany said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 wait, we got the Nord Stream," and there started to be people in the street chanting, "Reopen Nord Stream," and the U.S. looked at it and said, "Okay, well, Germany's getting a little too big for their britches. We can no longer afford the illusion that Germany is a sovereign nation. Let's get it done." From the looks of things, based on a lot of information, I don't know for sure. It appears there is a lot of evidence now, strong evidence that suggests that the UK was involved. That the UK basically said, "Okay, master, what do you want me to do? Blow the damn thing up. Done." And so basically, the US, through its vassal, the UK, launched a war against one of their vassals, but they don't see it as a war. And here's why: they don't. If you've got a country that you're occupying, that country doesn't have a right to make its own decisions anyway. So, from the perspective of the U.S., Germany was getting too big for their britches. They told Germany, "I don't care how much economic pain you have to go through. You're not getting Russian oil anymore, and we're taking all of your industry. All of it is moving here. You will keep your mouth shut, and you will do that. Don't you realize you're occupied by our bases? You will do what we're telling you to do." And the Germans started saying, "Well, we want to think for ourselves." And the U.S. said, "We'll show you how much you get to think for yourselves." England, what did they do? And you're like, "Well, that hurts England." Let me ask you this: how much you know about guard dogs? A guard dog is not trained to protect itself. A guard dog's trained to protect its master. There's a guard dog in the street. You run up behind that guard dog. "Hey, dog, get out of here!" Off it runs. It's running. Why? Because it's not trained to protect itself. It has no thoughts of its own needs. Now you got its master. Guard dog, "I'm going to come beat your master up." The fangs come out. It's going to kill you. It's going to tear you apart. Why? Because it's not its life. It will give its life. It will fight to the death to protect its master, because that's what it's trained to do. And that's what England's doing. England is fighting to the death. You come after England, England ain't going to do nothing. "Hey, please don't hit us." Oh, no. Look at Olaf Scholz. Look at Olaf Scholz. Can you get any weaker than this guy? Right? He's a whining little chump. Right? So you get these people in these vassals who have no inclination to look out for their own people. They have no inclination to protect their own interests because they're guard dogs. A guard dog don't protect itself. Now you come after the US and see what UK does. You come after the US and see what France and Germany does as guard dogs. Oh, you're going to get the teeth bared then. "Well, we don't like the US. I'll kill you. I'll slaughter you, but you may lose your life. I sure will. I'm willing to die for my master." Because that's what a guard dog does. He dies for his master. And you, sir, are nothing but a flea on his back as far as they're concerned if you live with him. You're along for the ride. You're in the saddle. And if the UK has to sacrifice all of its citizens to guard his master, sure, it's not even a discussion. It's not like the ruling elite class in the UK is going to sit around and say, "Guys, what do you think we should do?" I mean, hey, we on one hand, we've got all of these people here. They got pubs and bars and things they like to do. They got a lifestyle. They're enjoying themselves. Okay. On the other hand, we got the US saying, "Wipe all of those bastards out, impoverish them, put them in a life of unholy hell just to accomplish our neocon project." There's not going to be that kind of discussion in the halls of power of Europe. The US calls and says, "We want you to do X." And the powerful people in the UK say, "Yeah, okay." And they just go do it. They don't have you know what? You know why they don't have a discussion on how it's going to affect the working class, the working poor or the poor? Because they don't exist. They're peasants. What did they do with peasants historically? And they sold their property. The peasant went with the property. Who could care less? Remember what I told you the story about the bananas? What did they do? "Hey, we got some longshoremen getting bit by snakes on these banana stalks." "Oh, well, make sure the peasants box them." Why? Because if the peasants die, we'll get more peasants. That is what these people are: techno feudalists, right? They see. I'll put it like this: think about how much sense this makes. During the feudal times, right? The noble class saw peasants as expendable. And they acted that way. And if they needed a war, they threw a bunch of peasants there and they threw them out into to die. They could care less. They were expendable. They're peasants. We're the nobility. Their job is to die for us. They're guard dogs. They're cannon fodder. They're whatever we need them to be. What do you think? The hell do you think has changed? Look at England today. Look at the ruling class in Germany. Look at the ruling class in France. How are they treating the people in their country right now? How are they treating them? Are they treating them like they value their lives? Is the elite ruling class in Europe, are they treating the citizens of Europe like they value their families, their lives, their livelihoods, their futures, their education? Nothing, because feudalism is still there. It's just taken a little bit of a different angle. And so now it's the same. Instead of owning one ranch or farm with a bunch of peasants on it, each one of these countries is nothing but a farm, and all the Europeans are considered peasants. And now it's time for the farmer to sacrifice some peasants. So that's everybody. That's everybody in the country, peasants to be sacrificed. The only question is, will the peasants take it? If they, it's up to the peasants. It's up to the people. And I use that word, I don't believe anybody's a peasant because I don't believe in class divide. I don't believe that the homeless person or the doctor or the ruling elite class or the person who fixes cars, I don't believe that one is even or better than the other or worse than the other. I think they're all human beings and they all deserve the same level of respect. Unfortunately, the ruling elite class does not agree with me on that. So what they're doing is they are simply doing what they've always done. They're using peasants like they always used them. They're using them. The people they see as peasants, they're using them to maintain power. And now they're looking at it and saying, we had a time from 1991 until maybe 2017, 2018, where we were the sole power. We don't want that to ever change. And if we got to sacrifice most of our peasants, if we got to sacrifice 90% of the peasants, at least we'll have 10%. It's worth it if we can lose 90% of the people in our country and still maintain power. It's worth it, because I don't value, if I'm the ruling elite, I don't value their lives at all. At all. I need just enough of them to have that I can say I got a country. Just enough of them that I can say that I'm rich. And the poorer they are, the richer I feel. And that's where we are. So the Ukraine conflict has simply borne out a reality that people didn't know. They were hypnotized in Europe to think that they had some kind of independence and sovereignty, that it's somehow different than Guatemala or Ghana in the eyes of the US empire. They weren't. They just had a different kind of usefulness. You can help us. Europe, we want to mistreat these other countries who want to steal their stuff, and we want you to help us do it. And in return for helping us, again, cost benefit analysis. What does Europe get? In return, we'll let you have some of the goods. What does a pirate do? Pirate ship, they actually, on a pirate ship, they had a breakdown of who got what, right? If you're they get a bunch of gold, they get $1,000 worth of gold. That's a number, right? The captain gets so much percentage of the loot. The other, and it goes down. You're an able-bodied seaman, you get this percentage, blah blah blah. And it was worked out, and they were honest with it. And the pirates, look, everybody gets their part. It was broken down of who got what. And in the same way, the US empire, being a pirate ship, did the same thing. Hey, look, in fact, you can look it up. There's a great book. Do I see it? Somewhere around here. It's a book I would commend people to read, called All the Shah's Men. It's about the U.S. overthrowing the government of Mohammad Mossadegh in 52, 53, something like that, in Iran. And one of the things they talk about in that book was, afterwards, when the U.S. and U.K. did it, they then divvied up the oil. The U.S. is going to get 40%. Whatever, Europe or England, you'll get 20%. Some other countries, you'll get this percent. That they divided up the loot like pirates do. And so the cost benefit analysis back then was, when the US overthrows the government and steals their oil in one of the brown countries, the Muslim countries, Middle Eastern countries, Africa, when one of these countries of the lesser folks, they go out, they overthrow them, they steal their stuff, you get your part. That's why the UK, Germany, US, I said UK is a different animal. Germany, France, all of these countries did this stuff because they got their part. France is in particularly a mess, because the truth of the matter is, why does France consider itself a rich and powerful country? Because it steals so much stuff from West Africa, because if it wasn't, I mean, how'd France get all this gold? They got no gold mines. They stole it all from West Africa. So the U.S., I mean, the France has been able to maintain its neo-colonial empire like uh, 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 um, presence in Africa and continue to rob the poor damn African people. But why could it do it? Because of Africa. Because they could utilize the military power, the bases, the logistics, the satellites, the intelligence of the U.S. empire to crush any uprisings in West Africa that would stop the French colonialism. So they're in a bind. What the U.S. says, do what we tell you, or you can't use any of our stuff in Africa anymore. Well, guess what happens if that happens? France goes into total poverty because they're parasitical off Western Africa when it comes to resources. And the French people just think, hey, we're doing great. You're actually a neo-colonial power that's robbing the hell out of people like a criminal. This is reality. This is reality, whether people like it or not. I'm talking about reality here. All right, let's continue. So France is in a jam. They're in a jam because they need U.S. imperialism in order to keep from going into total and complete poverty, because they live off of other the resources of countries that they can dominate and impoverish. Now, what's happening is this. Here's what's happening. This is the whole thing in a nutshell. Cost benefit analysis. The Europeans are, it's not that they're waking up into a reality, or they're not. It's not that they're suddenly realizing. It's simple. The cost benefit analysis is coming. The ghosts of the cost benefit analysis are coming home to haunt them. That's all it is. Now they look at it and the leaders are like, holy crap. Now, don't get me wrong. The UK is ready to sacrifice everybody, any and everybody. UK, you're in a special project here. If you don't stand up and do something, you got no chance. Your country is just going to be, I'll put it to you like this, a vanilla version of Haiti. Look at what happened to Haiti. The United States empire. Don't you think Haiti's accidentally impoverished? The United States literally invaded Haiti, went to their vaults, stuck a gun in their face, stole their gold, and took it back and put it in Fort Knox. Do you really believe Haiti is just happens to be poor because the people of Haiti? No, they robbed Haiti blind. Haiti's not, in fact, poor. They wouldn't be there. Whenever you see a poor country and the U.S. empire's there, they ain't a poor country. The U.S. don't go to poor countries. They have a wealth of resources. The U.S. are there. They're poor in the same way that if I come out of a bank with $1,000 in my I'll put it like this: they're poor in the same way that a slave was poor. A slave's labor created a lot of wealth for the owner of the plantation. He just didn't get any part of it. And that's the same way Haiti's resources, labor, etc. They got sweatshops there, created a lot of wealth and resources for the oligarchs of Haiti and subsequently for the U.S. empire. And so that's why the people of Haiti are poor. The country has a lot of good resources that's being stolen. And guess what? The poverty there, that's the direction the UK is heading. And if they get there, maybe that'll wake them up. I don't know, but their UK is world of deep and serious trouble, as is most of Europe. Germany, they ain't looking so good either. So bottom line is, I think there are at least some forces in Europe that, if not rational in a way that they're thinking this thing through, as to the reality of the facts on the ground, they're at least rational enough to say, look, the cost benefit analysis never worked on our behalf, but so much. But now it has become so lopsided that we can't afford to do it anymore. And so what you're going to start seeing, to me, no matter what happens here in Ukraine, and I just think the Russians are settled in for a long one. To me, I think, but no matter what happens, I don't see how NATO and the EU stay together because of a cost benefit analysis. And if the ruling elite class aren't doing it, the people are. The people are. And if I could go to a cafe and get some wine and cheese and crackers and grapes and sit outside on the Champs-Élysées and chat with my friends about politics last summer, and this summer I don't have enough, I can't afford a friggin' grape, and my job is gone because all my industry closed, and you know, the place is a godforsaken hellhole. The price is just too high, and that's what's going on now. As I said, there's two entities: the ruling elite looking at it saying the price is too high. Now, the price for too high for them could be death. The price for being too high for them could be the people in this country are going to overthrow our governments. They're going to overthrow our buildings, and they're going to hang us. I mean, it is potential. That is a possible potential. Whether it could ever happen to that, I don't know. And that could motivate them, or maybe they'll just get hung. I don't know. Maybe there'll be no violence. Maybe the people of Europe will just sit there and quietly go into the darkness and say, what do we need? Food and jobs and heat and things of that nature for. We'll just accept, like lemmings right off a cliff. The people of Europe so far have been pretty good at doing that. So that's not something we really need to decide to look at and say it couldn't possibly happen. Look around. There's still a bunch of blue and yellow flags waving economic suicidal fools in Europe. There's a lot of people that are waking up, but there's still a bunch of them still running around here. Hey, where's my blue and yellow flag? Gee, I can't seem to find any food here. I'm hungry. Maybe at some point they'll put them together. Maybe not. Whatever is going to happen, that's the way things should work out. That's the natural. You know me, I studied the philosophy of Zen. Things work out fine. They work out the way they're supposed to be. People even say, well, what happens if we all get nuked and we die? What's wrong with that? We're probably not the first species in the universe that has wiped itself out. Probably won't be the last. I don't think that's going to happen, quite frankly. Not right now, anyway. I don't know. It could happen in the future sometime, but I don't see it happening right now. I think there's other things going down. With this conflict, is it a possible potential? It is. I don't think it's going to happen, but that's a whole time. Could go on and on and on about that. But anything's possible, right? Anything's possible. So back to the subject at hand. So no matter what happens, I think the Russians recognize what I'm saying in the long run. And they recognize that they don't have a dependable partner, and they're not going to be dependable partners. And if you shake hands with somebody and say, let's build this pipeline, let's do this, let's do that, the pipeline gets blown up. Here's the next thing you realize. They can't bargain with Germany. If Germany calls back and says, can we rebuild the pipeline? You know what the Russians will say? You need to call the US. They're the ones that blew it up. You don't have any authority over that pipeline. What are you calling us to ask us, what can you open the pipeline for? It ain't your pipeline, it's the US's pipeline. If any country now that the US blew up that pipeline, if any country calls Russia, we want to make a deal, the US is going, Russia's going to say, listen, I'm the Russians. Hey, you want to make a deal? Did you run it past your master yet? Yeah. Tell Tony Blinken to call me. I'll talk to him about any deals I make with you, Germany, France, Italy. You have no authority. You have no sovereignty. What are you calling me for? Call the US. If you can work out a deal with them and they call me, I don't trust them either. You got to pay me all your money up front. And then the answer is probably about 99% still no. That's what I'd say if I'm Russia. You don't have, first of all, Russia can't make economic deals with people that don't have the authority to make economic deals. Hey, Garland, I want to come to a salesperson, Garland, come to my company, and I want you to give me a presentation. And I go there. You know, one of the things I want to know, who are you and what do you do in this company? I'm the janitor. No. Why would I come make a deal with the janitor? You can't sign this paper. You have no authority whatsoever in this company. I'm not wasting my time as a salesperson to come and try to get you to buy a $55,000 camera system that's $400 a month for maintenance and all this kind of stuff, because you don't have the authority to go out and buy cleaning materials on your own. You got to call your supervisor and say, I'm running out of ammonia. So what am I wasting my time trying to make a deal? I'm trying to eat here, bro. I'm trying to eat, and I got to sell this stuff to you to eat. That's where I was when I was a salespeople. That's what salespeople do, right? In the same way, why the hell would the Russians try to make a deal with countries that don't have the authority to make a deal? They're vassals. And that's one of the, when I talk about the price of being a vassal of the United States, when I talk about the price of being an ally of the United States, one of the things that one of the prices that you have had to pay is a lack of other countries, of potential economic partners, seeing you as a credible partner, seeing you as an authoritative voice for your own country. So now, if I'm India, if I'm China, and Germany calls and says, hey, let's do this and build that together, China ought to say, did you run it past the US? You ain't got no authority. What are you going to do? I'm going to put $2 billion into building this LPG platform. I'm going to do this. I'm going to build ships and all that. And the U.S. going to come in and blow that stuff up. What am I? Come on, what kind of idiot do you think I am? The answer is no. Talk to the US. I need some kind of guarantees that the US ain't going to blow it up. Number one, and I still don't trust them. And then after that's done, you're paying for every damn thing. So if the US blows it up, you use the money. Number one. Or number two, if any deals we make, I need an insurance policy. And the insurance policy says if your master blows it up, that you got to pay me everything. Well, if I'm running any country, you want to make a country with a deal with Germany, don't you have to say to Germany, you don't have the authority. Oh, can we build a port? Well, as long as we make a deal, you put 10 billion into the port, you put 2.5 billion into this port. I'll put 2.5 billion into this port, but we need a deal. And the deal is if the US blows up the port, you got to give me my money back and you eat the whole thing. That's what you got to do dealing with Germany now. That's what you know. Now that that reality has been revealed, you can't make a deal with Germany because Germany doesn't exist. You either get a guarantee from them or you talk to their master, and you know good and damn well that their master can't be trusted. So how are you going to make a deal with the US? That is one of the prices that has been paid by US allies. Now their credibility, their economy has gone to hell. Their leaders have been outed as nothing but puppets, complicit. They're not. Look. If you're let me say this. If you think that Macron or any of these other mutts of Schultz or any of these people, look at this new woman in Italy. Let's all turn our lights off so we can. They literally said that we're going to stick it to Putin symbolically. Really? You know what you can do if you want to do something symbolically to stand up and if symbolism is important, everybody stand up. Let's all wave our hands in the air at the same time to symbolically stick it to Putin. If it's symbolism, it doesn't matter what you do. If it's only symbolism, you can say, let's all have a moment of silence to stick it to Putin. It's symbolism. So what you have is a bunch of leaders who are complicit. If she was honest with her people, what would she say? This symbolism ain't gonna do you no good. You can't eat symbolism. You can't pay your rent with symbolism. We need to do something to look out for the people in our country. But she ain't going to do that because she doesn't have the authority to do that. And B, if she did, she wouldn't do it. You've got to understand the nature. Look, let me add this. Let me say this. You got to understand the nature of empire. Think about what the UK did when they would go start a country. What would they do? And when they go take over country, they invade a country, they take a country, right? And they would put a person who would either be called the governor or the viceroy. That person appeared to run that country. The people in the country would go to the viceroy, the British viceroy. We need more rice. And the British viceroy would call his boss. They not call, but hey, the people need more rice. No, they don't have any rice because we're stealing it and bringing it all home to Britain. Yeah, but the people are going to starve. Yeah, that's the plan. The people are going to starve. There's too damn many of them now. Now, when the leaders of the town came back and said, Viceroy Nixon, what are you going to do about our rice? I had to lie to them. Why? Because I wasn't working for them. I was working for the empire. And now I couldn't say to them, you're all going to starve. I'd say, we're working on that. And we've got some shiploads of rice on the way. And then you go back. When will they be in? Any day now. And I kept saying that, hey, our people are dying. Don't worry. Just hold out. Those shiploads. There was no shiploads of rice coming in ever. But my job was to pacify the masses so that the empire could take advantage of them. That was my job. They thought I was working with them for them. They'd come in and say, well, I'd say, sit down and have a nice cognac. Guys, you know what? I've been in this country for a while as the viceroy. I've grown to love you people. I've grown to feel myself part of it. And people would, oh, thank you, Viceroy Nixon. Isn't that wonderful? Hey, we've got a great viceroy. He really loves this country. It was all lies. My job. And then as you slowly died off because you didn't have any rice, what happened? Oh, this is rough, man. I don't know. I keep sending letters to the king. I'm doing everything I could. I lied to you. I was complicit. I was helping to starve your people to death on behalf of the empire. Do you see where I'm going with this? Macron, Schultz, Rishi Sunak. Let's be honest about Rishi Sunak. Can we be honest about Rishi Sunak? Just like I said, look, Rishi Sunak, let me hold something up. Let me hold something up in case you didn't see it. See that? Let me show you something in case you missed it at the beginning of the show. See that? You know what that is? You know what that is? Back in the day, that was a gingerbread man. Back in the day, this was a gingerbread man. You know what it is now? It is a non-binary gingerbread person of color or something like that, right? That's Richie Sunak. Richie Sunak is a brown placeholder, in my opinion. And I guess people, oh, that's racist. Well, yeah, okay, call me a white supremacist then. I'll see how that works out. But my point is this, let's face it. You know, there was a tremendous amount of talk. This man, you know, the halls of power. You know, I mean, can we be honest about things every now and then? A good friend of mine, very powerful person, very not, I don't know how powerful he is, but very knowledgeable, international world person, went to people in England because there was a British citizen who was a black guy who was in another country who had been jailed unfairly. And this guy went to members of parliament, went to very powerful people in England, flew to England and said, look, guys, I need you to help me get this guy out. Right. Apparently, the guy had some powerful lawyers and they came and got my friend or whatever the case may be. I don't know why, but they got my friend and he went and talked to some MPs in England and said, look, I need to get this dude out. And can you get him out? He is a British citizen. And the MP said, well, not really. He's black. He's not really a British citizen. This is a reality. Like it or not. I don't care who likes or doesn't like this video. I'm telling you what I know. So here's my point. Rishi Sunak is not the prime minister of the UK. He is a person, a brown guy who's holding the spot until they can get somebody that they want in there. That's all. Look, let's face it. Have you seen Rishi Sunak lately? When's the last time you heard from him? The man is gone. Where is he? Does he even exist anymore? I don't know. You don't hear from him. Is he out giving speeches? Is he giving us his plans for what he's going to do? Hey, I'm going to fix them. Oh, we're going to make moves. We're doing things. Nothing. The guy is underground. He must be in the submarine service because he is running silent and running deep. That's the reality of Rishi Sunak. He's just a puppet to sit there and hold a place. But you got to ask yourself this. If he's holding a place, who's he holding a place for? He's holding a place for the real power. In the same way that Joe Biden is kind of holding a place. But Joe Biden's willingly a guy that they're working through. He's a good old-fashioned neocon. Rishi Sunak is, my guess, has been told, shut up, keep your head low, we'll tell you what to do. So people are like, what about Rishi Sunak's plan? This is what's hilarious to me. Rishi Sunak's plan. Does he have how long does he have? What happens if he doesn't turn things around by the fall? What happens if he doesn't turn things around by the spring, by the end of the winter? Well, he turned things around. You're implying that Joe Biden is in charge of this thing. You're implying that Rishi Sunak is in charge of this thing. There ain't no he. Rishi Sunak is not in charge of this thing. In the same way that Viceroy Garland, who was sent to this little country that the U.S. that the Brits have overthrown in 1867 as the viceroy, was not in charge of that country. I was a conduit for power. If I'm in 1867, the U.S. overthrows the country of whatever, and they send out this guy. He is your viceroy. He's in charge. If the people of that country thought that Viceroy Nixon was looking out for them, they were sadly mistaken, and they were going to find out sooner or later the hard way that he wasn't. And if the people of England think that Viceroy Sunak or Viceroy Macron or Viceroy Olaf Scholz is A, on their side, B, has the authority to make decisions on their behalf, and C, gives a crap about them, they are sadly mistaken. And they're going to find out the hard way. None of those things are true. And now the price of being a vassal, the price of being a puppet of the United States, the price of being a member of the empire is this. When things were going kind of well, you got your piece. They go out, they steal stuff. We're going to take 100% of this country's resources, and you're going to get your 20, 20, 20, 20, 20. We'll take 50. We'll divide the rest up amongst their vassals. They already did that. Like I said, read all the Shah's men. They literally overthrew the government of Iran and said the U.S. is getting this much of the oil profits. The U.K. gets this much. France, Germany, these other countries, you get this much. They literally overthrew it, stole the oil, and divvied up amongst their allies. Now, bad news for the allies. There's other sheriffs in town. Russia is a growing world power, and they're in Africa, and they're in Latin America, and they're making moves. China is a grown world power, not growing, and they're giving other people options. So now when the U.S. says to this country X, You better do what the hell we tell you, or we're going to destroy you economically. The country X calls up China and Russia, says, hey, you guys got any deals? And Russia says, we could help you out. What do you want? China says, we can work together. Let's build a canal. Let's build some. What do you have there? Well, we got bananas. We got this. We got that. And Russia and China says, we got wheat. We got industry. We got things. Let's work out a trade deal. And these other countries are like, whew, man, back in the old days when the U.S. came in, we didn't have a choice. Now we got options. Now we got options. And the fact, it's almost like, I hate to use a million analogies. A guy's got a girlfriend. You know, you read books about abusive relationships. A guy's got a girlfriend, and he wants to control her. Or it could be the other way around. Somebody has a significant other. What do they want them to think? They'll say, nobody else wants you. Nobody else would want you. Nobody else would ever want you. Why? Because they are afraid of competition. And they're like, I'm treating you kind of crappy. I better convince you nobody else wants you. That way you won't go looking around because you're pretty hot. And if you start looking around, all the guys are going to be sniffing around you. I better say you're bad. If I can convince you that there's no other options, then I can keep you. Right? It's unfortunate, but that's the way, that's a reality of those types of very twisted dynamics in some relationships, right? That's the twisted dynamic we're talking about. The U.S. would say to whatever country, hey, man, if you don't do what we want, we're going to take everything. We're going to get it anyway. Who else? There ain't nobody else out here. We're powerful. We're going to take your stuff. What are you going to do about it? You're going to give it to us the easy way or the hard way? How do we need to do that? We want your bananas. We want your coffee. We want your oil. Do we have to kill your leaders, overthrow your country? What do you want to do? Country, they didn't have an option. The mafia has approached you. What are you going to do? Right? Well, now they come in and say, well, we want your stuff. We're going to kill you. You know what they do? They pick up they pick up the phone. What happened in Mali? What happened in Mali? They said, get out, France. And then they called Russia, and the Wagner group started showing up. And the Wagner group is, let's face it, who is the Wagner group? Are they the Russian army? Think about the French Foreign Legion. They paid, what was the French Foreign Legion? You pay you're paid mercenaries, you're paid soldiers on behalf of France. Think about Blackwater and those kind of groups in the U.S. You're paid mercenaries on behalf, used by the U.S. government. That's what Wagner is. It's paid mercenaries. Lots of countries do it. They act like Russia's any different than anybody else when it comes to the Wagner group. No, they ain't. Right? So what happens in Mali? They say, French, get out. They call the Wagner group. They call Russia. Hey, we need help. Next thing you know, the Wagner group shows up. Uh-oh, that's a problem for the United States, isn't it? That's a problem for France, isn't it? They can call another country and they can get military, economic help, things. What happened recently? The Russia, look it up. Russia sent 20 million. The U.S. has all of these things. What do you call it? All of these sanctions on Cuba. The Cubans are going to starve now. The Russians sent them 20 million tons of grain free of charge. Free, right? So the U.S.'s sanctions ain't working as well as they used to, are they? China's working with them. Hey, we need to do some things over there. China's coming to the U.S.'s border saying, screw you. You're going to come to Taiwan. You're going to come to Ukraine. We're going to go to Cuba. But we don't need to put missiles in there. We're going to put 5G in there. We're gonna do some other things. We're gonna help give them food. We're gonna help them grow right on your border. So you got your way of doing things. We got our way of doing things. You do your things with knives. We do our things with a plate full of food and some technology. And now what's happening? The vassals, the countries that were being oppressed and taken advantage of have other options. And the vassals, the U.S., the Frances, the Germanys, et cetera, of the world are looking. And two things got to be happening. The people of these countries got to be asking themselves, man, this cost benefit analysis ain't working. Maybe we need to go in another direction. The complicit viceroys of the U.S. empire, such as Schultz and Maloney and all of these other people, and Sunak, if he even had the authority to be a viceroy, he ain't even that, and Macron, on and on. These viceroys got to be looking over their shoulders, saying, God, mercy, this country is going to turn into, like I said, it's going to turn into a white version of Haiti, because you're getting treated like Haiti. No, it's not that there's something bad about Haiti or the Haitian people. It's the way the United States has taken advantage of Haiti. It's not like Guatemala, El Salvador, that these are fundamentally, culturally, economically, mentally, emotionally flawed cultures and people. No, it's that they've been taken advantage of by the U.S. empire. Your turn, France. Your turn, Germany. Your turn, people in Europe. Your turn. So At the end of the year, this is what I say. You got the wisdom. Wake up to that fact. Wake up to that reality. Maybe general strikes. I think general strikes will work. And I think if you put enough pressure, there's a term called political cover, right? If I am a politician, there's two ways to get things done. One, there's a couple ways. Number one, you can replace me, right? Number two, you can put so much pressure on me that I'm forced to do it. Number three, if I have any inclination to do it, I may need the political cover to do it. I may need to be able to go to the people that are powerful above me and say, I got no choice. My country's falling apart. It doesn't matter which one you use. It doesn't matter if you replace Macron, Schultz, etc. It doesn't matter if maybe in the back of their mind somewhere they want to stop being complicit with the U.S. empire and screwing you. I doubt that's much of an option, but you can't hold out. Got to hold out for all possibilities, right? All possibilities and probabilities if you're trying to decide what you're going to do. But last but not least, what happened? Well, let me say this. If in fact they have any inclination to do the right thing, you have to provide them the political cover to do that by general strikes and things like that. That political cover then says they can go to the U.S. and say, we don't have any choice. And at that point, it doesn't matter what their inclination is. It doesn't matter if they want to do the right thing or the wrong thing. If the country's fallen to hell, if there's a general strike, they don't have a lot of other options. They got to go to the U.S. and say there's a general strike. And if the people basically said if we don't do X, they're not playing the game anymore. And those guys that we send in the black suits with the motorcycle helmets, the police that are phalanxes lined up to beat them and mistreat them and keep them down. Yeah, they're getting hungry too. They're getting hungry. And I'm starting to get the feeling that I'm going to say to the police, turn around and go get them. And the police are going to say, get them? They're not the ones that are starving us. They're not the ones. Those are my family members. Those are my friends. Those are my neighbors. Those are the people I used to go bowling and drinking and hanging out and playing football with. And now they're hungry and I'm hungry. And you're asking me to beat them, which I've been doing all along. But the price is getting too high. I ain't going to do it no more. That is the danger that the ruling elite class, that their Praetorian Guard, right? Their soldiers that they use to beat the people down. What happens when they start turning? What happens when their grip on power over those people starts to weaken? Because it does. It does. History tells us that how many times has this happened? It happened in, what was it? Was it 1917, 1919, 1917 in what was Stalingrad, I believe. Not eventually, but in what's the the name of the city, right? Where the government says to the U.S. says to its guard, says to its military, the government's standing there, the military's in front of them, and the people are out there with pitchforks, and the people say, we ain't backing down, and the government looks down to the people and says, open fire, and they look down at their police, they look down at their military, they say open fire, and they either throw the guns down, they turn around and point them to you, they back up in the crowd and say, we're with them. At that point, that's when you lose everything and your government falls. And that's the chance right now that the complicit puppets and leaders in Europe are taking. 1917, they are taking that chance. They are taking that level risk. So as far as, I'll say this, I had somebody send me an email today to say things are far worse than you think when it comes to the Russians, and they're actually struggling, and Russia's having trouble, and they're not winning in Ukraine, all these kinds of things, that we're hearing about the Russians winning or whatever is not happening, they're losing, they're struggling, and things are falling apart in Russia, blah, 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 right? And I said, I ain't on the ground. I can read, I can figure things out as best I can, but I'm not on the ground in Ukraine, so I don't know for sure how much of what this guy was saying is true or false. I don't know. I just read and try to report what I read. But here's the bottom line. Time is on the Russian side. Time's on their side, because the longer this goes on, the more difficult it will be for the leaders of the U.S. empire to convince their citizens that the dynamics of the current cost benefit analysis is either working in their favor, it's obviously not, or that there's some ideological or spiritual or emotional reason that they should suffer, that they have, because the game works like this, where we're fighting against an evil and we're all going to have to suffer, but it's important. It is so important that we defeat this evil that we've all come together in a stand down, in this Manichaean, look up the Manichaeans, in a Manichaean stand down, in this universe, there's good versus evil. There's a battle of eternal good versus eternal good, evil, ultimate good versus ultimate evil. That's the battle in the universe. And we're on the side of good, and Putin or Assad or Gaddafi or whoever the boogeyman of the day is, they're the ultimate evil. So you create this environment where everybody believes that they've come together to fight some ultimate evil, and therefore they're willing to suffer. Well, if I'm fighting the ultimate evil, of course I should suffer. The question is, how much suffering are they willing to do? Because it ain't going to stop, and the suffering's going to get worse and worse and worse, and they ain't even started. So realistically, I think the Russians are preparing themselves for the long run. I think they're in fact, I'll even say go further. If I were the Russians, there's two ways to look at this. You could say, I can end this damn thing now. Yeah, I can end it as not now. I can end it as soon as possible. I can hit the Ukrainians really, really hard and try to end this sooner than later, right? Or if you look at it and say, I'm at war with the U.S. empire, it's clearly the U.S. empire is using their, unapologetically using the Ukrainians as cannon fodder. They've decided to go after me, and the field of battle is Ukraine. If I take into account that there's a cultural war going on here, there's an economic war going on here, there's a kinetic war, there's all kinds, there's a diplomatic war going on around the world, all these kind of things going on. If I take into account there, then I have to look at it, and I would evaluate that. If let's say I'm in charge of Russia right now, and I'd say we're winning on pretty much every ground, every area, right? So here's what we need to do. Let's let this thing play out. So if I was the Russians, I would be content to kind of sit in place, to launch probing assaults and things like that here and there, to attrit my adversaries on the battlefield. But if I viewed France and Germany, all of these other places as a battlefield, I would say if I launch a big attack, maybe, who knows, it goes bad. And again, one option is launch a major attack and try to end it earlier rather than sooner, and then start your diplomatic and economic moves from there. The other is, if you see your enemy crumbling, just sit there and take out your adversary bit by bit by bit by bit, and then just say, okay, we're going to watch what happens over there, and we're going to keep pumping our adversaries. You're going to be running out. They're going to be running out of weapons. They're going to get weaker and weaker and weaker. You're going to be getting weaker economically. You're going to get weaker politically, where the people in your country are going to, if they're asking now, what the hell are we spending all that money for? Where they're going to be in another year. If I'm Russia, if I'm Russia, I'm saying, let's start by planning for 5 years. Let's start by planning for 5 years. Let's see what is the West going to do this summer? What are they going to do next winter? I'd say, look, let's do this thing. We're going to get through the summer. We're going to launch some offensives. We're going to see what they can do, and then we'll see how things look next winter. If I was the Russians, time's on my side. But I can see an argument for them doing some offensives now, but they don't have to. Let's face it. I mean, how long was the Chechen war? I don't know. Somebody can tell me, how long was the Chechen war? It wasn't a couple months. You know what I mean? So the bottom line is, how long have the Russians been in Syria? Since 2011. That's 12 years. They didn't go in Syria and leave in 6 months. Everybody's like, yes, the Russians are upset because it's taking longer than they thought. How the hell many wars are 3 months long? The World War I, World War II, were any of them over in a year? Right? So in reality, if you look at from a perspective of Russians and the history of a war, minimum set for 5 years, and see if the UK and France and Germany go at the rate of decline, economic and political decline of the West, of Europe. Can they go 5 years at this rate of political decline? I don't think they can. They'll fall apart. So if I'm the Russians, I'm saying, let's set for 5 years. If I'm Russia, here's what I say. Economically, all that kind of stuff, militarily, I want a 10-year plan. Let's say this war is 10 years. That's what I'm going to get from my people. I'm going to set up for 10 years, right? With an evaluation period of 5 years. So I'd say, let's run for 5 years. Let's hit them hard. Be ready to hit them hard for 5 years, right? To roll this thing out for 5 years. See if they can handle it for 5 years. We'll reevaluate at 5 years, but our real plan is for 10 years. But we'll reevaluate at 5 years. That's what I do that's what I'm thinking. The Russians are doing something like that, but I may be wrong. They may be trying to knock this thing out early. I don't know. I don't know. And of course, as long as they are in Ukraine, the U.S. empire is deteriorating, number one. Other countries are growing and getting more powerful, number two. The obvious collapse of neoliberal capitalism, that's what we're living in. We're living in a neoliberal version of capitalism. The collapse is obvious and imminent. So if you say to yourself, well, when that happens, can they hold out? So I think that's what we're looking at. I think we're looking at a combination of the long-term deterioration of the Western economic situation, particularly in Europe, starting off. I think you're looking at a Russian military and industrial complex that is going to be able to produce the goods and services that they need to keep going. I think so. And I think that at some point coming in the next year, at least, the Europeans are going to have to reevaluate the cost benefit analysis of being a member of vassal state of the U.S. empire. That's what we're looking at. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. I am tired. We got some super chats, and I think it's only right on Christmas Day. While I'm enjoying let me show you again. I got a bag of them. No, I broke one. I'm enjoying what is that? No, it's not a gingerbread man. It used to be a gingerbread man. But now, if you watch Hollywood movies, it is a non-binary gingerbread person of color. Don't you forget about that. And don't bite the head off my don't be biting the arms off of my non-binary gingerbread person of color. We must not abuse them. Because that wouldn't be right. Somewhere. I'm hitting some super chats. Let's check the super chats, see what questions people have on Christmas Day. Gee, how you see Russia changing their status to an Asian, I think they mean Eurasian. They're taking steps to qualify for any sporting competition as Asian soccer too. That's all. They realize that the world is splitting up. They don't want to do it, but they're like, hey, there's going to be there's going to be new people battling, and they're preparing for a reality that they didn't choose. And one of them is going to be in sports. Another is going to be online, to be quite frank. I think there's going to be two internets. There's going to be a Russia, China, Africa, Latin America internet, and one that the U.S. Controls. And if you've been paying attention to the Twitter files, the latter one don't look so good. Thanks a lot, JF. Let's keep going. Thanks, everyone. Wow, it's Christmas Day. People are actually doing Christmas presents for Garland. I guess that's what we'll call these super chats. Merry Christmas, Garland, and friends of Garland too. Salty Pretzel. Thanks a lot. Hey, Salty Pretzel's always doing good stuff. Mind Tab. And great questions. Salty Pretzel's always got great questions. Thanks, everyone, for the Christmas joy. All right, we're going to Rockfin. And we got some people on Rockfin. Oh, boy, we got all kinds of questions coming from Rockfin. Okay. Gerald Smith says Nixon door in 2024. Thanks, Dave Carlson. Certainly appreciate the tip. Dave Carlson with a tip. Dimitri Lascaris. Thanks a lot, Dimitri. Vervain Very, thank you. I don't see if you got a question, I'll be happy to answer it. There's not a lot of questions. Let me pick a question. Garland, you should see the way the way the U.S. treated the Pacific Islanders with nuclear weapons and told them it was good for them. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's the way things work. That's what the empires do. Garland calls it as he sees it. No BS. Thanks. Merry Christmas, all. Let's see what we got here. Someone says, I love listening to you. You paint words and you paint well. Thank you. Let me say this. There we go. We got thank you very much for Sam Isam. Thank you very much for Eric Suarez. Feliz Navidad. Thanks a lot. Let me tell you a little story about that. It's interesting. They said you paint words. 13 days. Bottom line is, when I was growing up, let's just say this. I don't, if you ever see my drawing skills, really like a kindergartner. I mean, my ability to draw and paint and things like that are that of a 5-year-old. When I was in Boy Scouts, we'd make birdhouses. Mine was the crooked one. The hole was crooked. Everything was crooked. You know, the birds, it was the last one the birds wanted to land it, right? I'm not good with that. And so I always thought, poetry, I don't even get it. People like, I love poetry. They read and I read it and I'm like, I don't get it. And so once I tried to write a poem, it was terrible. I mean, I just like made the words rhyme. It was horrible. I don't even know what the hell it meant, right? So I don't understand, grasp poetry. People put like, hey, this is postmodern something or other painting. Look at it. What does that mean? And I'm like, mm, I don't know, something about a duck. I don't get, my brain doesn't work like that. For some reason, all my taste is in my mouth, right? So, and I always thought I don't have any artistic skills. And then I realized, well, what do I like to do? I love to read and I love to talk. Read, 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 read. Let me pull out a book. Any book. Oh, here's a good one. The Plot to Seize the White House. The shocking true story of the conspiracy to overthrow FDR, right? I love books, all kinds of cool stuff. Let's put that here for now, right? So I love books. And I realized, well, if that's what I love, maybe that's where my artistic talent is. And I realized I love to read, I love to talk. So maybe my artistry is in talking or something like that, or writing or things like that. A lot of times, if we want to know where our talents are, all we got to do is look at what we love to do. And you follow your heart. You ever read the Alchemist, right? Follow your heart. You can't go wrong if you're following your heart. I love to read, so maybe talking is it. And that seems to be. I'm doing YouTube and radio shows and all that kind of crap. I did a lot of TV, but TV wasn't it for me. I was very successful in TV. I did really well, but it was on the move, but I quit. I didn't like it because when I realized that I was reading from a teleprompter, that's when I knew it was time for me to go. And a lot of options to make a lot of money in TV, but I reading from a teleprompter. I got to say, you can tell I got things to say. I got things to say. All right. Anything else, everybody? Merry Christmas, everybody. And last but not least, let me remind you that in this day of wokeness, if you are one of the woke Nazis, don't forget what these are. These are non-binary gingerbread persons of color. And if you made them at home, that would make them indigenous non-binary gingerbread persons of color. And if you bite one of their arms off, what would that be? Reachably challenged. How about this? They're now reachably challenged, alternatively abled. Maybe that's it. Alternatively abled gingerbread indigenous people of color. Non-binary, did I leave out non-binary? I don't know. Did I use everything? It takes you longer these days. I mean, if you really believe in that woke stuff, it takes you longer to say whatever the hell it's supposed to be than you look at it and you're like, that's a freaking gingerbread man. Shh. Someone could be very upset. Someone's feelings could be hurt that you called it a gingerbread man. Maybe it's non-binary. Look at the picture. Do you see any appendages anywhere? Maybe breast? No, you don't see anything. This is obviously a non-binary cookie and it's brown. We wouldn't want to be a white supremacist. So it is a person of color, and it is made of gingerbread. You can stay with that. And there we go. So happy holidays, Merry Christmas, happy Hanukkah, and whatever all the holidays that people are celebrating. Enjoy. Let me see this. Garland, your talking and video are totally not synchronized. You are way ahead of speech. I've noticed in the last few videos. Wow. Isn't that interesting? Well, I got bad news for you. If that's the case, there ain't a whole lot I can do about that, right? It's like one of these Chinese, I love the karate movies, right? So it's like one of those karate movies where people like their mouths go like this. And then you hear, you killed my master. Now you must pay. You must die. Prepare. Your kung fu is good. So maybe that's what I'm doing. Maybe this is really like a subtitled Chinese karate movie from the 1970s. I didn't watch them that to hear what they were saying anyway. I just wanted to see all the punches and kicks. So, all right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have fun. Enjoy your non-binary, indigenous, reachably abled alternative. Excuse me. Enjoy your non-binary. We'll finish with a picture. Enjoy your non binary, indigenous, gingerbread, people of color. Did I miss anything? I don't know. Whatever. Thanks a lot. My name's Garland Nixon. Enjoy your holidays. I'm out.